This is the Nippon Maru, a museum ship docked in Yokohama, Japan. The Nippon Maru was launched in 1930 as a replacement for the former sail training ship that had sunk a few years previously. The Nippon Maru was used in the 1930s and 1940s to train members of the Japanese merchant marine. In 1942, the sails were removed and it was used as an emergency transport ship, and then later, after World War II ended, as a repatriation ship. In 1952, the sails were put back on and it resumed duty as a training ship. It continued this job until 1984, when it was replaced by the next Nippon Maru. Now it sits here in Yokohama as a museum ship. YouTubers' worst nightmare to place their filming. I've got to figure out if I can separate their music from the audio of me talking, or if I'm just going to have to voice over everything. Anyways, here we are on the forebridge. The Nippon Maru is a 4-mast barque configuration. As you can see, it's got a metal hull, metal masts, quite different than the wooden sailing ships of old. The Nippon Maru has 2 bridges. So this is the forebridge. The forebridge is used when under engine power for steering. So there's an engine telegraph over there. There's the wheel, there's radar, and then over there would be the charts. And of course up here are your pennants for flat communications. So when coming into port, they would use their engine power to steer because they had to be a little more fine and they had to avoid ships and other obstacles. And a compass. Right, here we are at the bow. As you can see, here is the bow sprint. So the bow sprint was connected, oh it's bright, to the forward mast. You can also see the cranes and the anchors. So while it was used as a training ship, they used traditional style anchors that modern ships don't use, that require a lot of the crew to be able to pull up. It's made out of heat, which is then pulled into steel, and then a dowel is put over the bones. And waterproof to avoid fulcrum and pitch to make it waterproof. In the 1930s, they didn't have air conditioning, so these were actually used as ventilations. These are cow heads. So they would turn these to point them into the wind, and then the air would be forced down and inside the ship. Oh, those are the pegs used for the capstan. So when mooring, in these holes, they would put those wooden pegs to be able to spin in. Oh, here's a picture of it. Tighten the ropes. So historically, a lot of things were done manually on ships, and a lot of these training ships, they have you do it manually. Makes you appreciate what it was like back then. But on modern ships, we use machines. This room gives you an idea what your sleeping arrangement was like. Life of a sailor. Not a lot of space, so 8 to a room. This is the lower topsail yard, which is the 3rd yard from the top. So it was removed during World War II and when placed in 1952. And it stayed there until 2020 when it had to be replaced, which we have some nice photos of. That was a massive operation. It was 17.62 meters, 1,370 kilos. And there's just one part of it, which is massive itself. One thing I like about this ship is it's pretty tall, so I don't have to watch my head as much. All right, down into the engine room. So it was powered by 2 600 horsepower engines. These are the first and second domestic diesel engines produced by the Kegi Iron Works. Now we saw earlier regular sailor's rooms. This was the room for number one oiler, who was basically the equivalent of a chief engineer in more modern ships. So he was in charge of the 12 engineers' hands, who took turns watching the engine. Of course, you would want him close to the engine. This room is a little nicer, and it's got a mirror on the other side, so I'm wondering if this might have been for engineers or people that are a little more technical. So you have 4 to a room in here, and then the other one is 6 to a room. So this might be by seniority. You know, they have a little more space, more places to sit. They have a closet. You can see something kind of similar over here, except for it's 6 to a room. This room's even nicer. Nurse, head nurse, medic, doctor, head nurse. Looks like this was this room. So here's a scuttle. I've shown something like this before in my my video about the Soya. So this was actually put out the windows to force air into the room, acting kind of like a fan. So continuing on, we have like a sick room, a recovery room right next to the doctor's room. And then this would be the dispensary, doctor's room. Basically try to treat anyone sick or injured if they had to, surgery or other major medical procedures. It'd be kind of tough to be a doctor on a ship because it's rolling, it's pitching. I don't think it would be very much fun. This is the mess hall for the engineers and engineers' hands, which makes sense. The engine room is right there. So this is where they would eat. I assume that on the other side, those are their rooms that they stayed in. Another view down into the engine. There's our 600 horsepower engines. There's our boiler over there. Now we come to the kitchen where meals were prepared. This ship would have about 100 people on it because it was a training ship. They would have lots of cadets on board. You didn't need that many sailors to actually run a ship this size. It's because of the training function. So if we look in here, we've got massive rice boiler for 150 people, cooking pot for 150 people, another cooking pot for 150 people, tempura for frying. Let's see, cabinets, cooking table, washing. This was a huge operation to keep everyone fed because they were hungry after the hard work. And if the seas weren't calm, it was going to go it would have been miserable. Okay, this is the mess / classroom. So this is where the cadets would have classes, where they would eat when they were in port. This also acted as a social lounge. Yeah, you can see them taking class. Oh, some type of ceremonies going on there. Pretty impressive. They had a piano. They had books. This was sort of one of the places outside of your bunks, which were pretty small anyways, where you could hang out. So this was the social heart of the ship, I guess you could say. All right, we're going from wooden decks to carpet, so we are entering O-Land. And we're going to start with the captain's day room. So the captain's day room was something of a meeting place and office for him. This is where he would examine courses, listen to reports, meet with officers and cadets when he was at the anchor. It was basically a drawing room where they would house, visitors, VIPs coming to visit. This is where they would go. Captain's private room, which connects to his day room, so his bed, table, desk.
These are the officers' quarters. Each officer has his own.
Then his own bathroom. That's why it's good to be the captain. His private bathroom and toilet. Good.
Bathroom and a guest room used.
The first officer also has a private room. We're going to take a look in here. So he has bed, couch. He would have his own bookcase and his own space desk. Not as much as the captain. Here's some of the routes. Is the chief radio operator's room. So he has a private room too. Now, what's unique about this room is an emergency auto receiver. So basically it automatically sounds an alarm if they receive critical information, so he wakes up. So that's why he needs a private room. You never know when it's going to go off. Also, he's pretty important in the age. You know, radio communication is so big at this point that if you don't have radios, you're in trouble. Here is the officer's saloon. So this would be used as their dining room and social area. So of neat things about this is you notice the table has a gap here. So this is actually to stop plates or silverware from sliding off the table during a storm. Also, the table is bolted down so that it cannot move, because if you had a really bad pitch, you wouldn't want to be crushed by this table or the chairs that are also bolted down.
This is the officer's
That one you might be able to see a little better.
also a dining room.
This is the third mate's room. He also has a private room, though a little bit smaller. I love the woodwork in this room.
And officers
And
engage.
this in the room is the skylight with the stained glass of the Nippon Maru. And we have some constellations here. Is that, what, Big Dipper, Southern Cross? Officer's kitchen, or scullery to be correct. So this is where they would clean their dishes. They had special dish racks up there that made it so that the dishes wouldn't fall out very easily. It kind of held them, cradled them in place, so if the ship was pitching, it wasn't in danger. We have the purser's office. The purser would have two assistants. So the purser was responsible for paperwork, mail, and a lot of those formalities that needed to be finished before leaving port or when they were visiting a port. So they were actually very busy when they got in port. It was everybody else who got to relax when they got to port. This is the doctor's room. So I guess that other one that was by the infirmary, that must have been nurse's room. I must have read that correctly. So doctor got his own room. You needed a doctor for basically any long distance voyage that this ship would take. And so they would have a doctor on board who even sometimes had to go onto other ships when they requested aid. All right, so next we come to the chart room, which has surprisingly big tables for a ship of this size. So this is where the charts would be laid out. And this is also where they would report observations, changes in temperature, changes in pressure, changes in wind, to try to forecast the weather that the ship would be facing. So the cadets were actually responsible for that, and that was part of their training. Now we come into here, into the radio room. So the radio room was run by three people, basically. Chief radio officer and two radio officers. It would be covered 24/7. Now, this clock would, while they were actually sailing, be always set to Greenwich Mean Time. You see the red area in there? Those are mandatory silence times where you shouldn't use radio communication unless it's an emergency. Here is our facsimile receiver, so weather maps, news articles, and such are sent on there, weather reports, and newspapers, so they can read the newspaper each day. Now, in the case of an evacuation, they actually had portable radios that would be put on the lifeboats to then call for help. Basically, I'm in the water, please come save me. This is one of the lifeboats. It has a capacity of 40 people, and it would have food for 9 meals, 3 liters of water per person, first aid equipment, fishing equipment, so 6 lifeboats, 4 life rafts, and also boats number 5 and 6 were rescue boats, which were intended to go save someone if they fell in the water. However, they needed to be out more for quicker release. But if there was a storm coming, then they needed to manually be brought in, and all of this stuff was done manually. All right. So as I said earlier, when the ship is under motor power, it is steered from the front. When it is under sail power, it's steered here in the back. So 2 or 4 sailors, depending on the weather, because the harsher the weather, the harder it is to steer, would be in charge of that wheel. As you can see, there's the boom. There's the, what they call it, rat's nest, ratways, for climbing up. You can see the lifeboats. There's the funnel where over the engine for releasing steam. And there's the forebridge. Alright, that concludes our little tour of the Nippon Maru. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this tour of this sailing and training ship. Please go down to the comment section. Tell me what you think about the ship or some ships that you've been on that you liked. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.